Welcome back. Algerian boxer Imane Khelif's 46-second win at the Paris Olympics on Thursday has sparked a furious row about gender eligibility rules. Now, Khalif defeated Angela Carini of Italy after Carini quit 46 seconds into the match. Carini stopped the fight after only a few punches were exchanged, avoiding shaking Khalif's hand, and then fell to the floor in tears. She said later she had to pull out for her safety. On Friday, the International Olympic Committee supported the inclusion of both Khalif and Taiwan's Lin, two boxers in the women's competition who had earlier been barred by the International Boxing Association after failing quote-unquote gender eligibility tests last year. Now, the IOC has vehemently defended the inclusion of these boxers. In fact, they have accused those questioning the inclusion of aggression. This is what their statement says. Firstly, that there is misleading information about these two female athletes. The two athletes have been competing in international boxing competitions for many years in the women's category. That these two athletes were the victims of a sudden and arbitrary decision by the IBA when they were disqualified at the World Championships last year without any due process. Its statement also added that current aggression against these two athletes is based on that arbitrary decision. Now, the International Boxing Association, since unrecognized by the IOC, has also released its own statement defending its earlier decision to bar these two pugilists. The IBA has clarified that these two boxers did not undergo what is a plain testosterone level test to test the level of the hormone in your body. IBA says the two underwent separate and recognized tests. What those tests are exactly is not in public domain, and neither are the results. But according to the IBA, results proved that the two did not meet eligibility criteria for the female competition. The IBA says they had significant advantages over their other female competitors. Now, some abnormal levels of testosterone is one thing, and by and large, most sports allow some variations. The crucial aspect also is chromosomes, which define whether one is male or female. In sports, several athletes with hormonal or chromosomal abnormalities are called DSD athletes. And this has been a long-standing debate in sports worldwide of how much should be allowed or not, how much deviation should be allowed or not. Now, DSD stands for differences of sexual development. XY DSD particularly refers to athletes who are otherwise defined women but have 46XY chromosomes, which is generally the male pattern. These athletes also tend to have male range testosterone levels, genitalia that is not typically male or female, and most importantly, ability to use that testosterone in their bodies. Now, this is contentious because scientists differ on this, whether XY athletes have receptors or not for converting that testosterone in their bodies and for it to be used by their bodies. Now, many sports and their individual governing bodies have started making stricter rules to bar those with such advantages, quote unquote, or differences from female sports. The question that we're debating today is simply this: after what has come to light and boxing being the sport that it is, it's not just a contact sport, it's a combat sport. So are these IOC rules unfair to female athletes, particularly for a sport like boxing?
For these athletes, boxers are entirely eligible. They are women on their passport. They have competed for many years, and I actually think it's not helpful to start stigmatizing people who take part in sport like this. But they are women. They competed in Tokyo. I think we all have a responsibility, by the way, to try to dial down this and not turn it into some kind of witch hunt. These are regular athletes who've competed for many years in boxing. They're entirely eligible. They are women on their passports, and that, I think, is enough said from me.
For us, for IBA, of course, we weren't allowing this boxer to compete in our events, and it's what you see today is an end state result of ineligibility as far as our constitution is concerned, but the IOC have allowed her to box.
Let's go across to our guest joining us. Ashwini Nachappa is former India athlete, of course, has competed at some of the biggest events in the world. Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, chairman, Nephron Clinic, is joining us. Shyamal Vallabhji is a high-performance sports coach, has coached some of the biggest Indian athletes. And also Remy Bonney is executive director of Forbidden Colors, which is a gender activism body, non-government NGO that is functioning out of Brussels in Belgium. Let me go across to Ashwini Nachappa first up, because you are an athlete who has represented India at various stages. What is your opinion of what happened to Carini, and whether it is right for somebody whose gender may be under question, like the Algerian boxer or the Taiwanese boxer, to be competing against women, particularly in a sport like boxing?
Good evening. I would just like to say that every athlete has the right to compete in sports without discrimination. But having said that, it's a very tight rope to walk. I think IOC is walking on a very tight rope, trying to balance inclusivity with fairness to a certain extent. Also, I feel that this whole episode has brought out the non-cooperation between, associations and the Olympic federations. We are victimizing athletes for their fault, in a way, because these issues should not crop up at any given time. There has to be clarity, and there has to be cooperation from both. So if IBA is, having an arbitrary rule, it cannot be allowed in their sphere of, governance. Then IOC should have intervened much prior to this, rather than giving the athletes the space to compete without settling these scores and then making it an issue, because after all, the two of them have been victimized, and it is not fair. So, it's a very tight rope to, and this has been not the one of a kind that has come out in the Olympic arena, but I think this has been going on for
quite some time. No, absolutely. But overall, as a female athlete, Ashwini, the big contention is that while there are these DSD athletes, there is no great advantage that they get. Now, you've obviously competed against many from around the world. You know some of the cases that have come to light post your retirement as well. Do you think that's a fair argument to make? Some people would say a little bit is visible from naked eye. Let's not lie to ourselves what we can see. And let's not, mire ourselves in just scientifically being able to prove point 1, point 2, when you can see for yourself that there is a difference. Where do you stand on that?
I agree with you. Because though scientifically it's not proven, but to a naked eye, it is clearly visible in most of such cases. And I think I don't know what's the fair line to take, because it is an advantage for athletes who don't fall into that category. So is it a fair playing field? I don't think so.
You don't think so? And you made a very good distinction between what is fair play versus inclusivity. Remy, I want to ask you, you're a gender activist. You've kind of called this some sort of a transphobia. These athletes are not transgenders, by the way. They are not trans women, right? They claim to be women with some abnormalities, let's say on testosterone levels or chromosomal levels. But why do you feel that it is unfair to question whether they should be in the ring with other women or not?
Well, let me first start by saying I'm not a medical doctor. I am the information expert. So one of my treats when I saw this news coming is first looking at the facts. And these women are not claiming to be women; they are women. They are born as women, and as any urologist, as any medical doctor will tell you, one of the first things I've done when I was learning the news was calling one of my colleagues who is an urologist, and explicitly explained to me that some women also are born with XY chromosomes, and that does not mean that they have any physical advantage over other women. Yes, in sport there are women who have more testosterone than other women. There are even a lot of women who have same level testosterone as men in sports. Just like, but if we look at basketball, we do not have any limits to the height of basketball players, because obviously also the difference in height is also a genetical advantage over other players. So yes, obviously there should be a level playing field, but having the rules clear on inclusion actually will provide this level playing field. One other part, of course, of the work that I do is not only looking at the facts, but also who is spreading this kind of disinformation. Because indeed, it was transphobia in the beginning. Now more and more people start reporting that it has nothing to do with transgender issues. But if we are looking at who was starting to spread this news, it is clearly that the IBA was starting to spread this disinformation, and spread by far right European Twitter accounts, X accounts all over the world. If we actually look at the IBA, I have had a look at the board of the IBA over the last day, and we see very clearly who is sponsoring, who is leading the IBA, and that's Russia. We have seen Russia spreading fake news, disinformation about the Olympics since day one of the Olympics. They have everything, and they have put everything in power to just spread disinformation and discredit the entire
I get your
Olympics.
point. I take your point, Remy. But as far as ideologies go, I think in today's world, particularly with the widespread trans ideology campaigns going on, the lines are very pretty much divided. So while one side, the quote-unquote far right, could be accused... Just one second, just hear me out. If the far right could be accused of pushing a certain narrative, the far left or left activists can also be accused of pushing another narrative which is also scientifically challenged. Right? So I don't want to get into that. But your point on disinformation taken.
That's third grade high school biology.
Yeah, it is high school biology, but some people are refuting high school biology. For example, today we do live in a world where a man can wake up one day and choose to identify as a woman. So it's gone to that level, right? This case might not be that, but we have gone to that level of denying biology to the extent where sex and gender are being confused with each other. But like I said, I'm not getting into that debate because this case is not about that. I want to go across to Dr. Bagai as well. Dr. Bagai, I've gone through a few studies and there is no consensus on whether higher testosterone levels give advantages to everybody who has them or some of them who have them, and how much is that advantage and over what period of time. But what is generally very, very clear is that if you've gone through male puberty, you have significant advantages physically than female puberty. How do you see this debate? Do you think, testosterone levels aside, if you have XY chromosomes, you should be in a different category or you should be allowed in the female category?
Good evening everyone. So I think this is a more complex issue than what meets the eye. And it has opened a huge amount of medical, legal, social gamut of discussions, including genetics. And I think we need to revisit our criteria of screening athletes and allowing athletes at all levels with uniformity. You can't have different rules for world championships, some for Olympics, some for Commonwealth. I mean, that will be complete nonsense. But coming straight to the topic is, when you're looking at a gender which is not looking straight, it's a gender identity, gender expression, behavior which doesn't conform with the typical association of the sex assigned at birth. Now, when you're looking at a athlete or any other individual whose chromosomes are not typical XX or XY, there is a huge variation in it. So when you're looking at just a chromosomal study, it's a very detailed study which is required to identify which kind of variation in which chromosomes. You have 23 pair of chromosomes, 22 are common and one pair differentiates between man and a lady. When you are dealing with a male chromosome, you are running a higher testosterone level. That's well established. there is also a difference between free testosterone level and bound testosterone level. But testosterone overall has two basic advantages for all athletes' performance and all other activities in life. It increases your muscle mass, it gives you greater strength, it gives you greater performance skills, it decreases your fatigue, it gives you more competitiveness and aggression, it decreases your increases your ability to tolerate pain, you have power. Very importantly, it gets rid of fat in your body. It reduces your water content in your body. Therefore, a lot of people are using this illegally in what we call as a cutting phase and a building mass phase in bodybuilding. So we've seen not one, but we've seen hundreds and thousands of adolescents and young adults coming with this. So I have a wide bit of experience as far as dealing with these cases is concerned. Females also produce testosterone, but it's 120.
IOC obviously finds the genitalia examination perverse, and therefore they've disallowed, federations from doing so. I don't think that that's a bad thing on their part. Even if there may be some requirements, but I think it's fair enough with technological advancement. You shouldn't really have to do those tests on athletes anymore. But people are pointing out that, see, figuring out whether you are XX or XY is a simple swab test in today's time. And at least that should be allowed, or there should be clear, gender tests that should be done. It shouldn't be considered offensive. But for some reason, the IOC in particular is unwilling to let federations do that. Then how do you settle this debate if you don't do a gender test?
Yeah, Shivani, you bring interesting points. And I think the one thing that's very clear here is that there's a lack of transparency from the IOC with respect to the tests, how they conduct the tests, what they're allowing. And that's why we're in this situation. I don't think that the IBA facilitated this entire situation. I think immediately after, at the press conference, Angela went in there and she said, I've never been hit so hard in my life. It started from there. At that point. IBA commented 48 hours later, So what is very, very clear, as doctor says, if you have an XY chromosome, your body produces testosterone like a normal man. To give this to you in scientific quantifiable terms, the punch of a man is 162% greater punch power, which means that they produce 2.6 times greater force a man does than a woman. Right. And if your body is producing testosterone like a man, then it's going to translate into how you're punching, your contact that's in there. The one thing that's 100% sure is that these athletes are in grave danger in a contact sport. We can give the example of basketball, but basketball is not the full contact sport like what boxing is, like what wrestling is, like what judo is. There's a lot of gray area that needs to be answered with this. These athletes will never be able to compete in a full male category successfully because there are differences that in how their body develops. We understand that, right? But we are putting female athletes' lives in grave danger by allowing this, and the lack of transparency is precipitating this problem. And the
lack of transparency issue is, as Ashwini was also pointing out, and Dr. Bagai is also pointing out, it's fundamentally the IOC's responsibility. On one hand, they say, let the federations decide what their criteria are, but then when it comes to the Olympics, they've decided something completely different from what the federation wanted.
And Shivani, what you're saying is critically, the IBA has very, very stringent guidelines with respect to testosterone levels that differentiate male from female and their testing protocol. We are stuck between a battle with IOA and IBA, where the IOA has completely disregarded their statements. And, when the IO representative says that we should not fuel this argument and we should be all playing a role in subsiding it, I think that's a very, very convenient statement because, we have two athletes in there. And when are we going to actually bring this to the front and center and address it head on? And it's not as though the science is not clear and the testing is very expensive, that it cannot be done even in third world countries. We must understand that a person born with a sex development disorder will only really understand the presence of the XY chromosome as they start growing closer to puberty. If you do sex assigned at birth and you stick to that, which is what they've done, you present the athletes that they're competing at in grave danger and grave disorder.
Okay. So, very quickly, Shamal, would you be in favor of maybe creating a third category for athletes like this? What is the solution to this?
I don't know, and I'm not so in favor of a third category as such. I think that we have enough testing protocol that can clearly distinguish one category or another, and they should fall in one of those two, to be honest. I don't think creating a third category as such is there. If the Olympic Games has certain standards that need to be met for either category, either a female or either a male. And now we have enough scientific evidence that can distinguish which category you fall in. So if you fall in that category, you meet the stringent requirements of those competitions to qualify. Creating a subcategory is not really the answer moving forward.
Okay, Ashwini, very quickly, same question to you as well. Ashwini, I'm not getting your audio.
I'm not for a third category. I think Vallabhji has just clearly, explained that in contact sports, the advantage that these athletes have. And I think the responsibility lies with the IOC to bring clarity and transparency so that everybody is on a level playing field. Now, if it is going to be on contact sports, the advantage is going to be more, then they should decide accordingly. For the events or the category, disciplines that it doesn't make that much of a difference, then they should take a call. But eventually, the IOC should bring in a transparent kind of a ruling on this, which all federations should abide by.
Yeah, uniformity is also needed along with transparency. Remy, final 30 seconds to you too. It's important. Would you concede that it's important to not get
here as well that the Algerian boxer has in the past also lost from other women. So that's also a clear statement that we need to make here. It's a mere fact that she has lost in the past from women. So the mere fact that now the Italian athlete is just abusing the outcome of her game. To state that the Algerian athlete should not belong to the game is just childish to me. I agree with all of the other guests here that we should not aim for a third category. That we should make sure there is a level playing field and very clear guidelines for everyone.
All right, I'll leave it at that. I do thank all of our experts for joining us. Very contentious issue, always has been. Let's see if this latest episode urges all federations and organizations to figure out a solution for this. Thanks a lot for watching. The Hard Facts is coming up after a short break.